All right, guys, what's going on? Today we will talk about the world of AI. So I've been testing these products for since the launch of ChatGPT in I think it was like November 26th of 2022, like a few days before it went live in like December, the first week of December. Obviously got some word, saw whatever was going on online, looked cool, mind-blowing experience the second it really got released. Um, Obviously, it's magical. I still have not gotten into the transformer model, formula, the algorithm, of how this stuff works behind the scenes. I've watched. Now, I'll mention some key players that I think anybody that's in the industry or not in the industry that's like would like to do a little deep dive or do a rabbit hole this weekend or whatever, whenever we're free. So, key players. Obviously, Elon Musk, Sam Altman. They founded OpenAI. Jensen Huang, NVIDIA. Their GPUs power everything in the industry because they are the best. They are better than whatever AMD provides, whatever any other competitor provides. Then there are some key players that were at OpenAI. Now, OpenAI, I think, was founded in 2015, so it's not really that old. Ilya Skitsvazer, Mira Murati, and Greg Brockman. Now, Greg and Sam are still at OpenAI. There are some famous emails of Elon, who funded OpenAI with $38 million of his own money at that moment in time as a nonprofit. Obviously, the trial that's going on right now. But what's important is that Ilya, I think Mira worked at Tesla in their Tesla AI to help start self-driving. The other guy that's not mentioned, he's not a founder, but he was critical both in OpenAI before and after, and during the Tesla, particularly self-driving programs, is Andrej Karpathy. So Ilya left OpenAI. He was a critical member. Elon's a huge fan of him. He has his own AI lab, research lab. I honestly don't know how research labs are funded, but OpenAI was a research lab. It still is, the nonprofit at least is. Mira, Tesla, OpenAI. She started her own, I think, called Thinking Machine. And then, obviously, Elon, even though he's doing so many things, it's so interesting that he was at the inception of what we currently use, like ChatGPT and all these other models. But because he was working on Tesla AI, he was simultaneously working on real-world AI, physical AI, well before these guys were working on digital AI. So different aspect, different angle, but he's a deep understanding of the problems they're facing in real time. Obviously, he funded it. So ChatGPT, really cool. Obviously, highly recommend. They have like 1 billion users a week or a month or something like that. Unbelievable. If you don't already, I recommend paying for at least the $20 version. It's a step up from the free version, and that's the case with all these AI models, which is what I want to talk about. Obviously, it took about 12 to 14 months before the next model, I think, really came out with some step up in their function. Text generating, awesome feature. There were a lot of hallucination problems early on, I remember, but we really got beyond that, which is amazing. I was definitely I'm completely out of the industry in that sense, but I was already working on software investments at that moment in time. So I think in 23 is when I actually pivoted into real software stuff. So when I looked at this stuff, I noticed that OpenAI particularly was working with this cool Canvas tool, I think it was, in I think they released it mid-2023. So at that moment in time, I can't remember if I was using Google Bard, probably. It was one of the first users. And they might have released Notebook LM or some variation, because remember, Transformer model and paper was written by Google, so they were already well ahead in terms of engineering, but they didn't have an application, consumer application particularly. So I had been using Google Bard, terrible product at the time. I had been using Notebook LM, which is an amazing product, particularly the mobile app. I highly recommend it to academics, researchers, students, anybody that does a lot of reading. It can consume tremendous amounts of YouTube and books and PDFs and create mind maps and briefs and study and video presentations, PDFs, podcasts now. But early on, it was an amazing tool just to consume 30 PDFs. It was an amazing tool. It didn't have any hallucinations, which was the differentiator. And then they added like multi-language features, which Google does very well. So obviously ChatGPT was the best at the time. I noticed in 2023 when I started using it more like everybody else that it was starting to write code well. It understood languages, number one, very well. Obviously English and text was very good. But it could like write in Python. And then it could write in JavaScript and HTML, and like it could decipher like C++, and it could translate things in engineering and software engineering and computer science that I just never had the time to study. So I might have understood some element of like JavaScript and front end and HTML and what goes on to build a website, and anything else in e-commerce. I understood all of that and some elements of payments, which I was looking at. But what I did not understand well was like databases, or how storage and APIs and function relays and like all these things that were going back and forth. Like now it's like tool calling. I didn't have enough capacity, and it actually was really hard. Most people do not have a deep understanding. They might have like top level understanding, like they read it in a book or they studied in university or watched it on YouTube, even if they're in the industry as an engineer or developer or a computer scientist. But for many years, there wasn't like people call themselves full stack engineers, but they were either front end or back end specialists. And that's a really hard problem. Like you cannot do both. It's very hard to do both. Even like Amazon, AWS, that's a huge back end piece, but they don't build like websites. It's a very different business model. Like Squarespace is front end for websites. So I don't even know. It might have taken like 12 to 16 months. Basically, the industry didn't move. It wasn't like much going on. And then Anthropic and Claude was not popular at the time. I think it was beautiful. Like it was really cool to use because Claude at the time called? Had a beautiful script and writing process. But the problem that I was facing with all those models, particularly ChatGPT and Claude, was I was hitting token limits very quickly in 2023 because it was like not even 30,000 tokens or something like that per chat. So you couldn't have a really good conversation, especially because I was trying to learn how to like all the programming languages and how they work together. And quickly when you copy and paste a tremendous amount of code, it consumes all the tokens. And then if you put it in a PDF, it consumes the entire chat window token limit. So you can't have a continuous conversation. So I kept hitting those windows. Those are my primary roadblocks across all the LLM models until Bard converted into Gemini, Google's current product ecosystem, family of LLM and applications, AI applications. And they released what was called AI Studio, which is designed to be like a developer sandbox. Now it's designed to be much more for like API keys and vibe coding and like building beautiful applications in prototype mode. At the time, I think they had like 100,000 or 200,000 token window limit. And for me, that was gigantic. And then they had a beautiful way that you can cut, branch, and extend conversations in different directions. So I started using this like massive developer tool to start writing and reading all these applications and like huge context window. Now it's at 1 million to 2 million. So I have like these long conversations that I basically have never stopped talking to the computer with. ChatGPT and Anthropic had these limits, so I moved off real quick. And because I became a beta tester for AI Studio and Notebook LM, they didn't have any cost. So it wasn't even like $20 a month was a lot. I wasn't paying the $200 a month for additional token windows, even though I might have had an inferior model, but I had no limits to the level of knowledge. Basically, my demand for intelligence was unlimited. So I could just continuously just keep testing things all the time. And then I eventually learned how to use APIs from multiple applications in the world of financial services, financial data API, stock market APIs, options, trading, pricing, fundamentals, SEC data, company data, investor data. It's like hundreds of API data sources. So many data points. Like that's why Bloomberg is a multi-billion dollar business. That's why FactSet and all these major businesses and S&P Global and Capital IQ were around for so long, making so much money. Is they're basically API businesses that provide and relay investor data or financial information for investors. So I was using it to build my own investor tools, both internally, then externally, and then started using it for a lot of other things to learn how to build financial software. and I really learned the ins and outs. So it was pretty amazing from back end to front end. Mobile app, Chrome extensions, websites, all this stuff. So I built like between, let's say 2023 and then 2024 and 2025, I've probably built like 40 to 50 applications. And they're mostly like things that are just prototyping, testing, pushing out live, etc. Great stuff. What happened, what I didn't notice at the moment in time was everybody was using ChatGPT, very popular. First mover advantage makes a big difference. And then people were shifting towards Claude or like some other model that was coming out. And the reality was either better intelligence or better context, or they liked the personality, or they had specific features like projects and folders that were really cool that Gemini just didn't offer. And they were locked in. They didn't have a really good export feature for your chat history. So once you started using ChatGPT, everything was in there, so you couldn't really move it anywhere else. I only use Gemini because I just thought that Gemini, one, I use Android and Chrome and all these Google products and Workspace, that if I continue to use Gemini and they figure out a way to integrate it in Docs and Sheets and Gmail and Android and then Chrome and then all these features and then YouTube, I will be familiar with the functionality across the entire ecosystem of products. Even if it's like an inferior model by 6 months, meaning it's not dumb. It's just that they haven't invested in some areas that like maybe math or sciences or coding as much as everyone else. But I'm not an expert, so it doesn't, for me, I really can't tell a significant difference. And I'll catch up in 6 months anyway. I just figured the vertical specialty in Google was more valuable than going out to be working with OpenAI or Anthropic, because they didn't have the capital or firepower, which is the current problem they're having. That's probably a conversation for another time. So I just stayed in the ecosystem of Gemini, and their products just exploded. So you could use them across every single part from consumer to enterprise. Gemini's web app has so many beautiful features. Obviously, Nana Banana is a gorgeous image generation product. It was definitely one of the best. I use the YouTube Ask feature, Ask Gemini, to stop watching videos and podcasts. I just get a chapter summary. I use Notebook LM on a very regular basis. I use all the enterprise workspace features in Docs and Sheets. I still use AI Studio quite often. I use Anti-Gravity to build and write code for websites. And then obviously there's some other things in the back end. But Gemini, this ecosystem of products has just, the 2 million context window is just, I think that's like a competitive advantage that people don't think about, because they're just paying a tremendous amount in either API costs or whatever to use Claude Code or Codex by OpenAI. And if you're a coder, which is what really took off in like Q3 of 2025, and then Q4 2025 is when it really hit the tipping point where all the coding models started becoming agentic. Yeah, Claude Code is probably the best for coding by far. And then Codex is really close in terms of like power users that are developers. But if you're not a developer, I don't think you can tell the difference. I don't think it makes a difference which one you use. But I do think it's important to like pick the one you're most comfortable with, because I use Elon's Grok API. I use the API, and I use the X.com Grok a lot. And it probably has the best real-time intelligence, which is really important if you're reading news or fact-checking things, etc., and doing whatever else. And now they have a development feature, like building Grok builds, and then an emulator, and then video generation, and then video game generation, and all this stuff. It's going to be pretty interesting, because there'll be the fourth player that a lot of people use, but it just simply doesn't have the number of products the other players have. And I see OpenAI building more and better coding tools, which I think they'll excel at. I think they have to shut off their other features that weren't successful, like they did with Sora. Anthropic has already made the bet on coding. I don't know. I think there's like tremendous upside, but I'm not a developer, so I don't know the capacity limits. But it's probably really high. So they probably have like the room to go from 30 billion annual revenue run rate to probably upwards of 80 to 100 billion, because the capacity and demand for coding is so extreme. And basically if you can either power your current coders, replace below average coders, or not need to have the need to hire better coders, I think you're basically paying 3 to 1 for one coder. So one coder can now manage the capacity of 4 coders. So you could basically, the $200,000 current coder is worth $800,000 to $1 million. So you could spend that much money per coder. So I think the capacity limit is really 3 to 4x where it is today, 3x probably at the minimum. And I think OpenAI is going to have to go in that direction because it's so lucrative. It probably has higher gross margins. Enterprise contracts are very valuable, and people have a preference in tools. I think it's going to make a big impact. And I think Grok is going to go in the same way. That's why Elon made the bid for Cursor. I think Gemini is going to attempt some things, but Gemini is gigantic. Google has tremendous firepower. They do way more than enterprise already, so I think they just have the capacity just to do more, which is what they do. So they might look like they're behind, but their product scope is so wide, which is something that I love a lot. So I wanted to talk about the difference between these 3 tools. I think it comes down to preference, but I do still think that Gemini is the best for the average person in business. I do think that's more important for most people because they're writing in Google Docs, they're sending Gmails, they're receiving things in Google Chat, they're watching things on YouTube, they're doing things in Google Search, they're doing things all over on the ecosystem that if you know how Gemini works in one ecosystem, you can translate that knowledge to another product in another vertical that the other applications simply do not have. They do not have the capacity to do it. So I think that's important. I valued it. I find it very valuable. It's also very profitable in that sense because I could do more with less. I don't have to go out and learn a new product. I just wait for them to provide me access to another product or something of the certain of the case. But I think of the 3, that's the reason why I use Gemini. I think I'm going to go deeper into the Gemini ecosystem in terms of providing more of documenting what I'm doing in the space. But I think it's the least understood and it's probably the least well marketed as well, which is interesting because Google has the greatest reach and the most distribution. But I think there's room for all of these guys. It just really comes down to preference of what you want to do and how you want to execute these applications or build applications or use coding tools or use just the GPTs, the LLMs. So check it out. Gemini's awesome. I would test it out at the minimum in terms of the new web app because they're releasing some pretty cool tools. That's what I've come across from Cloud Next that happened 2 weeks ago, and Google I/O is happening next week. So if you use the tool, let me know which one you find, and then let me know the good and bad for each as well.